Hey, good morning, everybody. It's PennLive opinion editor John Micek. Good Tuesday morning to you. I'm here with Franklin and Marshall pollster, political scientist, and professional sage Terry Madonna. We're going to be talking all things Pennsylvania primary. The election is 1 week away as we sit here today. Plenty of races up and down the ballot, lots of stuff to talk about. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Submit your questions, and over the course of the next 30 minutes or so, we'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. Terry, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure. That's a lot of social media you got going on
we're
here,
ubiquitous.
John.
We're everywhere. We're everywhere. All right, primary. May 15th, next week, the nickel tour. What's the bottom line?
Well, first of all, I think we're going to see a larger than usual turnout, particularly among Democrats. As you know, there are what we call waves that take place in 2014 and 2010. In those midterms, there was a Republican wave. The Republicans turned out more voters than the Democrats all across the country, and certainly in our state. They picked up seats in the state legislatures around the country and in Congress. This year, we have the opposite. This year, it looks like a Democratic wave will take place. By that, I mean that here's what we're finding. Democrats are telling us they're more likely to vote, point number one.
Right.
Point number two, more Democrats have filed to run for office, and let's just talk about our state, for the state legislature and for our congressional seats. More Democrats have filed. Number three, Democrats in the polls that have been done say they are more interested and following the election, meaning paying attention to the stuff that John Micek writes.
Well,
you know, but you get the point. All in all, it looks like a Democratic wave is coming.
And we know one thing is firing this. What's firing all the enthusiasm?
Well, what's firing it is what all midterms are about, a referendum on the President of the United States. Since the Civil War, the average loss in midterm elections for the president's party, regardless Democrat or Republican, is 32 seats. Since World War II, if the president's job performance was below 50%, below 50, the average loss is 36, and as we sit here now, 41, 42% positive for President Trump.
We've seen some significant Democratic pickups in specials leading up till Tuesday. What does that tell you about the level of enthusiasm, the level of interest that's out there right now?
There's no doubt about it. Democrats are going to vote. I think Republican turnout will be up too, but Democratic turnout will be up. And in our state, we had a special election out in western Pennsylvania in the 18th Congressional District where a novice, Conor Lamb, a lawyer, had what? He beat a Republican in a special election in a district Trump won by 20 points.
That's right.
And we just had a special election in Arizona 2 weeks ago in a district Trump won by more than 20 points, and the Republican candidate only won by 5 points.
That's right.
Yeah. So here's what's going on. Millennials. It looks like their turnout is going to be up significantly. Only 17% of them voted 4 years ago. 17%. Yeah, in 2014. More likely to be Democrats. Number two, the Republicans have a problem with college-educated women Republicans. If we go in these special elections that you referenced a minute ago, we find them moving away from President Trump and from the Republican Party. So that's a second big group that we're going to be looking at carefully when it comes to the primary next week.
And we know that Democrats are working hard to try to get to those voters. Tom Steyer, the big progressive billionaire, people have seen him on cable advocating for President Trump's impeachment, dropping about $3.5 million in Pennsylvania to try to reach 18 to 35s through his Next Gen USA, part of a larger 30-state, $10 million nationwide effort to try to mobilize those voters to try to get them out on Election Day.
That's a good point. And what seems to be, there are two things that seem to be motivating them. One is the horrific shooting down in Parkland in South Florida where 17 students were, killed in that, I'm going to call it what it is, murder, outright murder. I think you would agree.
I think it's more than fair.
Yeah, murder. And we've got the Me Too movement that's, certainly active on college campuses. But the bigger issue driving students, and there have been something like 1,000 demonstrations all over the country by millennial groups, many of them folks in college, it's one word: guns. It's about gun control. And again, I'm not getting into whether we should have it or shouldn't have it. I'm just saying that's what's motivating a lot of the millennials.
All right, so let's get into the races. We'll start at the top of the ticket. On Tuesday, Republicans will pick among 3 candidates for Pennsylvania governor: Scott Wagner, the state senator from York County; Paul Mango, the former healthcare executive; and Laura Ellsworth, the attorney from Pittsburgh. What do voters need to know about these 3?
Well, let's start with how many different ways can we say crapshoot? I mean, this has been a wild and woolly primary, one of the wildest that we've seen, with probably $7 to $8 million spent in television commercials. I don't know if I want to say the vast majority, but the majority of them negative, and that's been literally the talk of the election, is how negative Mango and Scott Wagner's commercials have been. I guess Mango more personal than Wagner's, but they've both been tough. That's and Laura Ellsworth, who's I joke about this. She is in a 2,500 person law firm. It boggles me, because there are municipalities that don't have 2,500 people, and very active in the business community, head of the Chamber of Commerce out in Allegheny County. Bottom line here is that she hasn't had the money to compete with Mango and Wagner. She's been endorsed by a whole variety of newspapers and individuals. It looks like, maybe you give the edge to Wagner, but I'm not predicting, believe me.
We know that Wagner is the party-endorsed candidate.
Exactly.
It's been, I think, 40 years since the Republicans broke from the party endorsement, so it obviously carries some weight. Do either he or Mango break 30%, 1, and 2, to what degree do probably a large number of undecideds, though we haven't seen a lot of public polling in this race, break one way or the other, who make up their minds when they go into the booth, and does that create more of a path for Ellsworth to sneak up the middle between these 2 guys?
They're both great questions. Number one, I'd be really stunned if somebody gets more than 30%. I think you could win with 30, 32, 28%. That wouldn't shock me in a 3-person primary. Some think it's going to be very close between Wagner and Mango, given their profile. Now, Ellsworth, I think, if she had the money, would be more formidable. Do I think you could rule out somehow, some way, an upset, given the negativity that the other 2 have demonstrated, have shown? And here's what's fascinating. If you take the policies that separate them, or let me rephrase that, if you take the issues that would come before them as governor, I'll bet dimes to donuts there wouldn't be 5 to 8% difference in the way that particularly Mango and Wagner would govern. And now imagine that. They literally are on the same page, and there are nuances there are some issues that they're different on.
Right.
But by and large, I think you would agree, they're more similar than dissimilar. And so it's become personal and less about the issues, because what is there that they can talk about that the voters would actually latch on to? And Ellsworth just simply hasn't had the money. Can you rule out somehow, some way that she could sneak in this wild and woolly environment? No. Is it likely to happen? Probably not.
All right, that takes us to our second kind of crazy primary. That's believe it or not, the Democratic race for lieutenant governor.
Yeah.
A 5-candidate field.
I can't keep them all straight.
Current LG Miket Stack having some issues. What's going on there?
Well, basically what's going on there, and
let's talk about the candidates first.
Okay. We have, let's see, if I can remember them, you have a woman named Ahmad, Nina Ahmad, who
former deputy mayor from Philadelphia.
Right, worked for Jim Kennedy. She's very liberal. She's made it clear about her progressive stance in the commercials that she's run. Probably the candidate who's considered more likely to give Stack a race and who could win. We know he's giving him a race, but who could perhaps win is John Fetterman, the mayor of Braddock. That's an old steel town. Braddock is also very liberal. I use liberal and conservative descriptively. I'm not getting into whether they're right or wrong. He's been endorsed by Bernie Sanders. He's the quintessential liberal candidate. When he walks into a room, you don't have to worry about whether you know him or not. He's 6 foot what, 8?
Something like that.
And he usually wears shorts and a T-shirt. He's dressed up
all
on
black.
He's
all
dressed,
always all in black.
Yeah, he's dressed up on occasion now. I would think, and remember, he's the candidate basically from the western part of the state, so that might make a difference.
Why does that matter?
Well, it matters because look, how many voters are going to go to the polls and know who the lieutenant gubernatorial candidates are? Relatively few. We do have some commercials out there, but by and large, it's a crapshoot. So you get out in the western part of the state and you have the county name, and Washington and Westmoreland and Greene and Cambria and Fayette and all those, you know, you're going to get some votes, I think, if people don't know. Well, I know that person. He's from a neighboring county. He could be one of us. That less takes place in the southeast.
And you talk about commercials. We're hearing this week that between the three of them, Ahmad, Stack, and Fetterman, they're going to drop about $1 million.
Correct.
On TV in this final push to election
Correct.
day. Extraordinary for a Democratic primary for lieutenant governor.
Well,
a Democratic primary for LG at all is an extraordinary
thing.
thing.
Let's look at it this way. In a second term, in the first term, it's always crowded. Second term, almost never. But here's what's really important. Governor Wolf and his lieutenant governor, Michael Stack, have a zero relationship, none. They don't communicate, they don't talk. The way I judge a lieutenant governor is the lieutenant governor has 3 roles. Number 1, preside over the Senate. Number 2, you chair the pardons board, but that only makes a recommendation to the governor.
Right.
The third one is
they check the governor's pulse.
Yeah, they check every day, right? They call in, make sure the governor's all right. And we've had 2 lieutenant governors that have served in the governor's office for a while. Mark Single, when Governor Casey went in for a double organ transplant, now the governor came back.
Yes.
But you had Mark Schweiker, who literally was not acting governor, but governor after
when Tom Ridge went to run DHS in D.C.
Right, Homeland Security, exactly. And so it's not a good thing when the governor and the lieutenant, and by the way, Governor Wolf has given Michael Stack nothing to do, 0. And they had this investigation about how.
And that's the only reason we're sitting here talking about this right now is because of Stack's personal and professional travails in the office.
Exactly, exactly. And so who knows, Stack might use his support in Philadelphia, but he has to, you know, kind of deal with Ahmad on that.
To what extent does she dilute him in Philadelphia, you think? You know?
Well, I don't know to what sense she has sort of the connections in the wards. What really matters is the wards. And it's my understanding that Stack has the support of Bob Brady, the Democratic city chairman, a congressman who's leaving office, very powerful, and Johnny Doherty, who heads one of the powerful unions. And I would be stunned if he doesn't come out of Philly with a sizable vote, and then the rest of the candidates divide up the vote. Okay. And on the Republican side, we have 4 candidates.
That's right, exactly.
And 2 of them, here's something else. 2 of the Republican gubernatorial candidates have named running mates and campaign with them.
That's right.
Wagner with a guy named Bartos, who's a businessman, a real estate guy down in Montgomery County. Now, he's running commercials ad nauseum. And Mango has picked Diana Irey Vaughan, who's a Washington County commissioner, as his running mate. That's very unusual. So you can see how odd this whole election for lieutenant governor. Nine candidates.
And the great irony here, of course, is that under state law, the governor and lieutenant governor are each elected in their own right in the primary and then only run together as a ticket in the general. Yeah. So if fate decided to play a cool trick, Scott Wagner could end up with somebody different, Paul Mango could get somebody different, or we could have different gubernatorial candidates and different LG candidates.
Yeah, it makes no sense. And as you know, there are bills that have been routinely introduced in the legislature to not do anything with the lieutenant governor until after the primary, and then let the gubernatorial candidate of each party pick his or her running mate.
Dave Argyle bill in the Senate right now.
Subject to approval by the respective state committees. Not that what I care matters, but I think that would be a good idea. The other way is a crapshoot. And it's a heartbeat away, and you need a governor and a lieutenant governor working together. I think it enhances not just sort of the role of governor and lieutenant governor, but I think it's better for the state.
Okay. United States Senate, we've got Lou Barletta, the Republican congressman from the soon-to-vanish 11th district,
Yeah,
who's
right.
running against Jim Christiana, a state representative from Beaver County. Any surprises there?
No. Christiana does not have the resources and the money to run a statewide race. There's not been any commercials as we speak, no presence. You've got Lou Barletta, who is endorsed by the Pennsylvania Republican Party. He's also a member of Congress, which means he has 700,000 or so people in a district. Now we have 8 million voters in the state, so he's running statewide. The other thing that's fascinating, if you want to look for a referendum on Trump, if Barletta were to win the primary, imagine this. He was Trump before Trump on immigration. When he was mayor of Hazleton, it seemed like he was suing the federal government every day over immigration. He also was co-chair of the Trump campaign in 2016, and he was on the transition team. I can't find an issue that Barletta disagrees with Trump on. Trump's endorsed. We're going to debate whether it's a formal.
He has spoken praisingly of.
Yeah, but let's be
Barletta.
honest. We know what that is in all practice, and he'll be in this state. And conversely, Senator Casey is one of the top 5 Senate critics. There are 49 Democratic senators. I put him in the top 5 as a critic of President Trump, with the exception of trade and tariffs on steel and aluminum. Other than that, he's a tough critic of the president. We'll have to see what happens. I'd be stunned if Barletta doesn't win the primary.
Bob Casey's sitting on a ton of money. About $7 million when last we checked.
Now remember, he's won 5 elections in our state: 2 for Auditor General, once as state treasurer, and twice as United States Senator. 4 of them by double digits. So, we talked about the wave earlier. The wave. It's just as it helped the Republicans win the governorship with Tom Corbett in 2010, regain control of the state house. In 2014, pick up seats in the midterm. This is the reverse. It's a Democratic year, and that's going to help Governor Wolf and Senator Casey, who at this point are likely winners. Notice how I said that. At this point, are likely winners.
All right, let's zoom in on races for Congress. We'll start in the West and work our way gradually east. The new 17th Congressional District, Democrat Conor Lamb.
Keith Rothfuss.
Briefly had 2 primary opponents. They've cleared the field for him there, so he's not going to break a sweat on Tuesday. So we're already looking ahead to the general election. What are we looking at there?
Well, that's going to be a tough race. Right now, it's not, when you get to a solid chance for a pickup, you don't see that in that district. Keith Rothfuss has, I think, been there. I'll probably be wrong about this. I want to say 2012. He's a conservative. He's relatively low-key, and again, I'm not being critical of him. His style is such. My sense about that is that, that could go either way. I would rate it probably a toss-up right now. Rothfuss will have the problem that Republicans are having with the Democratic wave, in that reconfigured district. That's a tough call. We'll have to wait and see.
Lamb's got a little bit of rock star going on from his win in the special in March. We know that the Tom Steyer people are going to be active in that race.
And he's also an incumbent for all of, 7-8 months?
Exactly right. We'll stay in Western PA. There's the new 14th district seat. You've got that primary between State Representative Rick Saccone and State Senator Guy Rentschenthaler. Any call there?
Yeah, I think that's more of a Republican district. It's going to be tough for, I think, Saccone to lose that. Overall, it's not a district as we debate the districts around the state that looks likely to change.
And the Democrat they face in the fall there is?
A state senator. Who is the Republican?
The Democratic incumbent.
Democratic. Oh, he's the primary we're talking about.
We're talking about the primary. We'll worry about that when we get to it. All right, we're moving east to the 10th district. The new one in Dauphin County, represented by Scott Perry. About 4 Democratic candidates, I think, there who are seeking the nomination on Tuesday.
Yep, and a couple of guys in the military. Here's the situation that Scott Perry faces. Number one, the district now includes Dauphin County. Before, it was basically a York County seat. Scott Perry had little trouble winning re-election. Dauphin County was won in 2016 by senator, secretary, senator, whatever, however you want it, both are accurate, Clinton by what, 7 or 8 points. Right now, again, it's not on a likely change, and most of the national experts, you know, Charlie Cook and
David leaned likely,
Larry Sabato down at the University of Virginia and the 538 blog, Nate's, most of them are still look like it's that Perry's likely to win, you know, should win re-election, but this is another one of those districts that underwent a big change, number one. Number two, where we have to see who ultimately prevails in the primary. Number three, can Perry establish himself in Dauphin County? Now we know Harrisburg and the suburbs of Harrisburg, you know, are obviously more Democratic now, but northern York County is pretty rural. The southern part of Dauphin County is pretty rural. And much might be which party's likely to turn out their voters. But right now, it's not on the national radar of a district that's likely to change.
All right, we move further east. We're looking at 3 open seats, 2 in the Philadelphia suburbs, the one held by Ryan Costello, which is the new 5th district, the new 6th district being vacated by Meehan, and the new... You're right. And the new 7th district seat, which is the Charile Dent seat, where there are all healthy contests.
Right.
What are we looking at there?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start in the 4th district. That's now basically
the new Montgomery County 4th district.
And remember, that county before the Supreme Court's remedial map had 5 members of Congress.
That's right.
Not one of them lived in the district. 5. So you had a little chunk here and there. That district, I think, is fully expected to go Democratic. There's a large contingency of people running. I think we have a couple of state lawmakers in the race. We'll have to see how that goes. By and large, I think that's one that's likely to change. There's little doubt in my mind about that. Then you have the 5th.
Before we leave that race, we have at least two female state lawmakers, Representative Mary Jo Daley, Representative Madeline Dean, former Congressman Joe Huffle, who had been quietly enjoying his retirement, swept in at the last moment. He's angered some progressive activists because he could be a spoiler in that race, but one seat where it looks like a woman might actually win.
Madeline Dean seems to be...
He could take it away from her.
Well, yeah, but she seems to be the front runner with the endorsements. That's a good point. And we'll have to see what happens. Again, here's what we're facing. Multi-candidate fields, large fields, in situations where it's all going to come down to organizational work, which groups within the party are doing what in terms of the primary.
Right.
It's a crapshoot. Dean seems to have more of the support among, quote, the women's organizations, if I got this correct, and some of the more liberal groups.
List, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, but we'll have to wait and see.
All right. Moving to the Costello seat.
Yeah, well, that's a woman named Chrissy Houlihan is the only Democratic candidate in that race. Ryan Costello got out after the filing period ended, much to the chagrin of the Republicans because he left them high and dry. The reason Costello, who had actually had an easier time winning, got out was he said it was small kids in a family and what they always say, to spend more time at home.
Right.
He also cited some disagreements with President Trump. The difficulty now with that district is that it includes southern Berks County, translation Reading,
right.
City of Reading.
Making it much more difficult
and
for him.
Houlihan has now become sort of the prohibitive favorite. She's a former, I think she was an engineer in the science field and has a lot of support. I guess Ed Rendell supported her. Yeah. She's gotten, former Governor Ed Rendell, she's gotten support from a variety of places, so that wouldn't shock me if she wins.
All right, move a little bit further to the right, heading east. The Meehan seat, the Delaware County, it's like 15 people, 12 or 13 people running in that seat.
Don't ask me.
Richie Lazier, the former Philadelphia deputy mayor, apparently one of the favorites in that race.
Right, and that looks like a Delaware County. Here's something to think about. Of the 4 suburban counties, Bucks, Chester, Montgomery, and Delaware, 3 of them now have Democratic voter registration edges. Hillary Clinton won all 4, including Chester. Barack Obama in his re-election won 3 of the 4. He didn't win Chester.
That's right.
In the off-year elections, otherwise known as the municipal elections, in all four, the Democrats made gains in county-wide elections.
That's right.
So Delaware County is now likely to go Democratic, and it's just a question of which Democrat prevails and how close the elections are. But of Pennsylvania's 18 congressional seats, I think 3 of them, the 3 we're talking about, the 4th and 5th and the 6th, are more than likely to go I'd be shocked at the end of the day if they weren't Democratic seats.
All right, we'll zip up to the Lehigh Valley. The 7th District seat that Charile Dent is giving up. 3 Democratic candidates there, former Allentown Solicitor Susan Wild, Pastor Greg Palmer, and the Northampton County DA John Morganelli, who is now being targeted by Tom Steyer's group for not being sufficiently Democratic.
Or liberal.
Has the most name recognition of the bunch. What do you think there?
Yeah, I think he's likely to prevail, but again, we're in this uncharted territory. That district, which Charile Dent's old 15th, which came the whole way down into where we're sitting, into South Central PA, where you and I are sitting right now. It is now Lehigh, Northampton, and the southern part of Monroe.
That's right.
And what do we know about Lehigh and Northampton? They've become increasingly Democratic.
That's right.
And so, I don't know, but here's another situation where the Democratic voters, more than Republican voters, are taking aim on electing women. As I said, I'm not saying that Republican voters don't want women voters. There are more female Democrats running for Congress than Republican female voters in our state. And in a number of these primaries that we talked about, there are women running, and we don't know how that will play out as a distinct factor in the outcome of these elections.
Right. All right, so in the limited time that we have left here, we have about 5 minutes. I mean, we're having these conversations about all of these different maps. Voters are going to show up on election day, maybe think they're going to cast their ballots for somebody, and then it turns out there's somebody else. And what are we looking at there?
I think we're going to look at how it gets reported is another matter, a considerable amount of confusion. I mean, imagine there are 2 special... there's the possibility that you can go and cast 2 votes, one in one congressional district and one in another congressional district, and we're going to have, I would think, a million or so voters who are going to think they're in one district, but they're not in that district because of the remedial map, which, 2 months ago was laid down by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And there's going to be a good bit of confusion. In many of these races, the candidates don't have the money to go on TV. They're going to use what we're doing now, social media and old-fashioned legwork. When you're running for Congress, you can do a little. It's not like running for the state house in Pennsylvania, 55, 60,000 people.
Right.
You're talking about 700,000. So legwork only gets you so far. And if you think about it, they're going to have to find a way to reach the voters in these multi-candidate fields. Now, here's what's fascinating. In the primary, the county is after their name. I mentioned that before. So I wonder, and some people have suggested ballot position. In the old days when we had those levers to pull down, and there was a study out of one of the California universities that said it probably makes about a 5% difference, meaning if you're first. I think now the way the ballot's laid out, probably is negligible, but who knows anymore. I think overall, lots of Pennsylvania voters are going to be really confused. First of all, they might be confused by the number.
Right.
They might say, like I lived in the old 16th, it's now the 11th. Now I know that, but there'll be a lot of voters who will go to the polls and say, what's this all about?
Speaking of which, the 16th, that's Lloyd Smucker and Chet Beeler squaring off there for about the 9,000th time in a row.
Second time, but you're close.
It only feels like forever. Last but not least, the Pennsylvania General Assembly. All 203 members of the House are up for election. Half of the 50-member Senate, those who live in even-numbered districts this year.
Right.
Any surprise primaries? We do have 3 special elections on primary day.
Yeah, I really don't. I don't see any. I think here's what'll happen. You and I both know that because of gerrymandering and in House seats, you could have 2 or 3 incumbent House members upset. In the Senate, maybe 1 or 2. If any. The sense that I'm having right now is that if you're a Republican, many of the people are running as Trumpites. It's a test of how closely you align yourself with President Trump. Now, that's not so true down in the Southeast, but once you get out of the southeast quadrant of the state, and forget the cities,
right,
the urban areas where the Republicans are vestigial. That's a good way to put it. They're non-existent anymore in the cities. Not every city, to be sure, but in many of the third-class cities. So bottom line here is that for Republicans, it's Trump-like. For Democrats, increasingly Democrats are running as liberals. So the polarization is playing out. Republicans, you better be a populist, you better be an outsider. Democrats, you better be a liberal, or to put it another way, a progressive Democrat.
Right. All right, Terry Madonna, that's the view, the exhaustive view. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and experience as always. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a great day.